Welcome back to Parenting Explained. I'm your host, Dr. Hammond. Today we're talking about children and mental health or mental wellness and what that really means for children in today's society. Our expert here, Nathalie Ellis, she is a licensed professional counselor. She is also a nationally certified counselor, and she's a certified professional clinical supervisor with a private practice in Decatur, Georgia. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. So really, a lot of times when parents think of, or parents or society, when we think of mental health, we imagine the worst case scenarios, the most extreme cases. But could you define what mental health really is?
Yeah, mental health is a simple dysfunction of psychological and emotional well-being. And so it doesn't have to be anything significant, the worst case scenario like schizophrenia, but it could just be a simple distress in how we're handling day-to-day stressors. And a lot of us are struggling with that, and a lot of kids are struggling with that.
Right, and I think that's a good point that kids are struggling too, because there's this notion that, well, kids don't have the same responsibilities as adults and they have this easy life, so they don't have mental health issues. Right. But we know that to not be true. So what are some common mental health conditions that you've seen in children? Yeah,
with children, the most common one that I've seen is considered, it's called oppositional defiant disorder. So ODD for short, where you have a lot of kids who have a hard time following instructions, following the rules, parents' rules, so they're non-compliant. So that's the number one that I see. And then you have, there's a rise in ADHD, is common, people have heard of that. There's depression, anxiety. Now there's also a lot with autism, which is under the pervasive developmental delayed. So there's lots of different diagnoses out there, but there's so many things before we could come up with that conclusion that this child has some type of diagnosis. So. Right,
and I think the first one you had mentioned, ODD or oppositional defiant disorder, maybe some parents are watching saying, well, my kid doesn't listen to me, you know, but what is the difference between a child that is just not wanting to do their chores, not listening at home, versus a child that has oppositional defiant disorder? Right, so with oppositional defiant, with every diagnosis, there's a list of criteria we have to follow, and we have to make sure that they meet these criteria. So with oppositional defiant, it's not just the fact that they're not listening, but they're not listening at home, but they're also not listening at school. They're not following rules. They have temper tantrums, they're talking back, they tend to be argumentative. So there's so many components, and with that, it's causing a disruption in the home, and it's causing a disruption in the parent-child relationship as well. Right, so we're not talking about the child that just here and there is not want to do their homework. Correct. Right. Correct. Yeah. And what are some of the causes for, for some of these disorders, the depression and anxiety or ADHD, but just mental health in general for children? What's causing these things? And we definitely have to look at the genetic components, because again, a mother, when she's carrying, when she's pregnant, a lot of that stuff do impact the womb. So there's a lot of genetic stuff that's going on when a mother's pregnant, but then environmental plays a big part too. And so, you have a lot of parents who are stressed. A lot of parents who doesn't know how to handle their own emotions, who don't know how to cope with loss, and who doesn't know how to deal with conflicts, and kids are looking at that. And many times when I have parents who bring their kids in, the child is the identified problem, but a lot of times the child is a lot like the parent. Yes. They're mirroring a lot of what the parents is mirroring, but again, as parents, I need the child to just do and not follow, do what I say, not as I do. So that's a great point. What you brought up about sometimes thinking, well, the child is a problem, so please fix my child. Yes. But are you saying that sometimes parents need to fix things? Many times, you start off, assessing the child and talking through with what's going on with the child. But many times, as time happens, I would usually bring the parent in and say, you know what? I think there's some things with the parenting that we need to work on, because the parenting strategy is a big part. A lot of times when the child has become the identified problem, then everything the child does is a problem. And so at that point, as the child, there's a feeling of hopelessness. Unintentionally, yeah. Right, there's hopelessness, and then the behavior, the negative patterns and negative behaviors just tends to be repeated because, well, that's the only way they get attention as well. Right. So there's not so many components to that. Yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in. I mean, for parents, unintentionally, making the child feel hopeless.
Right.
It's a hard.
And with parents, a lot of things that I talk to them about is helping them recognize strengths in their child. Okay, many times when they come in sessions, the child is already hearing all the complaints that's going on. So sometimes I have to, stop that. But helping the parents say, okay, you've told me a lot of the negatives, but tell me something positive that you did see as well.
And I like that you do that a lot, because it is important to focus on strengths. And many times as parents, I think we just think we have to discipline our children, which we do. But to say you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you haven't done your homework, you haven't done the chores, and focusing so much on what our children are not doing instead of their strengths and who they are.
Definitely.
Is huge. And how can parents do that? What are some concrete ways they can focus on their child's strengths?
One of my supervisors years ago used to say, catch them being good. So once we identify the things that we want the child to do, no matter how simple, we want to praise them for that, or acknowledge it. Acknowledge them doing those things and praise them for it as well. Not necessarily with rewards, but being able to say, hey, I noticed you did that. Because what typically happens when the child does bad, or in society when people do bad, that gets blown out of proportion. Everybody knows about it. Teachers are there, parents are called, principal's office. There's so much attention put into that negative. But then I've been doing what I'm supposed to do the last 2 days. Nobody noticed it. Right. And so again, with certain kids, oh, you pay attention to that, huh? You noticed that. So.
And that's good that you said praise can come in different forms. As you mentioned, it can be verbal praise, and some children absolutely thrive on that. Yes. It can be praise in the form of small rewards or whatnot. So it comes in different forms.
Definitely.
Those are some really great tips. So thank you so much. And we will be back to talk some more right after this. Dr. Hammond with 5 great tips to help your child during the school year. Number 1, have a plan at the beginning of the school year. Maybe you're watching this and it's not the beginning of the school year, and that's okay, but try to have a plan at the beginning of every school year when it comes to homework, when it comes to consequences for school, when it comes to your reinforcements and how you're going to praise academic achievements. Number 2, make sure that you know who the key contacts in your school district, who those people are, because it's so important to make sure that you know who to go to if your child has a problem. Many children are affected by bullying, for example. You might have a problem with your child academically, or there may be another issue that you need to resolve. So know who the key contacts are in your school district. Number 3, make sure to familiarize yourself with the rules at your school. There are many rules in many districts that have specific rules when it comes to bullying, when it comes to special education, and all the other needs of students. So make sure that you know what those rules are. Number 4, make sure to be organized and keep a copy, a physical copy or a digital copy of all of the important school documents, so you know where they are and they're readily available when you may need them in future visits to physicians or other mental health professionals. And number 5, make sure that you have a team of support and you use it, whether it be your family, your friends, the school system, or whomever else. Make sure that you utilize those individuals. Thanks. Welcome back. We've been talking with our expert today, Nathalie Ellis, about different things concerning children and mental health. And there's a lot that parents can actually do at home as well. So maybe it's not to the level where they need a mental health professional, but there's some things they can do at home first. Sure. What are some of those things that parents can do to help their child? Sure,
definitely. Consistency and structure is very important. It's important to know your child. All kids are different in terms of how they learn, in terms of how they receive information, and so providing structure and routine. And so with that, sometimes we need to write their goals down, we need to write their chores down, we need to make sure all the schedule of the day is written for them, so they have a good, and not just enough to say it. That's what they get at school. Right. So. Right. So those are a lot of things parents could do. Consistency, structure, again, recognizing when they're doing the right things,
Yes.
and not just
Praise.
focusing on what they're doing wrong. It's important for parents to also find time to play with their child, because a lot of times we are in a position of authority. Do your room, do your homework,
that's
clean
powerful.
up.
Very
What'd you
powerful.
do? I didn't like that. You know, we do that a lot.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that could create a disconnect in that relationship. And so family time, playing games, eating dinner, those are so important to do together.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
important. I really like that, especially about play.
Yes.
Because play is how children start to develop, especially younger children.
Yes.
Start to develop. So playing with your kids is so important.
So important. And teenagers like that too. I have a 15-year-old son, and he's like, Mom, can we go outside and play basketball? So they still like that. You know, that's a way of connecting, where they feel they're on, to some extent, the same level as us.
Right.
You know, you're not the parent in that moment.
And that's powerful. I mean, when you talk about connections and how beneficial connections can be, because there's a lot of research that shows that connections, that social support is so healthy for a child.
Yes.
But, you know, maybe some parents are just struggling in parenthood with, there's so many things that they may be blaming themselves and saying, this is my fault. Maybe the child is acting out in school. Maybe they're not listening at home.
Sure.
But what can parents do to sort of manage that guilt that they have inside about being a bad parent or things are their fault?
Definitely getting some parenting support. Many times, again, when I work with the child, sometimes I need to get the history on the parent, just their own parenting, their own experience with parenting, because a lot of times we parent the way we've been parented.
Interesting, yes.
Good or bad,
Which could be good or bad.
whatever that lies. And so helping parents understand that, again, depending on our own experiences, we parent from that experience. And so, for example, I had a parent who, her mother wasn't around, so her mission is to be the best mom possible at all costs.
At all costs.
So she ignores a lot of things because she's trying to be the best mom, and so part of that she overcompensates with her kids. You know, so again, when the clinician's speaking with the parent, you're trying to figure out a lot of those things, so we could see how is that hindering the relationship, or how is that hindering the parenting. Because again, kids need structure, consistency, consequences. You know, that's important.
But really, that's really a great point about maybe examining your own way that you were parented. And like you mentioned, sometimes it's good to do what your parents did when you were growing up, and sometimes it's not.
That's okay.
And sometimes it's not healthy. And sometimes, though, I wonder, is it hard for parents to understand, have you found in your experience, to understand when it may not have been healthy, the way they grew up? Like, this is the way I was raised, so I'm going to do this too, but it's not healthy.
Right.
Is that
sometimes it's hard, because in their mind, if they did it to me and I'm okay,
right? Yeah.
And then helping them see not everybody's the same,
right?
And so I have a particular grandmother who parents her grandchild, and her grandchild, you know, tests the limits. But at the same time, a lot of people are also pleasers. Grandmother was a pleaser, so as a child she was a pleaser. Her granddaughter is not a pleaser. She's not trying to please you. She'll test the limit. So it's about just give her the consequence. But a lot of parents do the power struggle. I just want her to listen because I just said so. Not every child will just do it just because you said so.
Right, and I love that. I love that because it's so true that you cannot parent every child the same. Especially maybe you have 2 or 3 children at home. It just, like you said, every child is different. So
and not the way that you were parented, because you're different than them.
Exactly.
So you have a lot of parents who also, I want the child to be the way that I was.
Right. They have a completely different personality.
You got a whole different child.
Yeah. So that's going to be a lot more difficult. But what about if the struggle is just too difficult at home, and you do need to seek professional services? So sometimes there are things you can do at home, but sometimes it's just too much, and you do need to seek help of a professional. What are some recommendations you have for parents?
Definitely seek a professional counselor, you know, mental health or services out there, so that's definitely important. The school system has a lot of support. You know, one thing I tell parents, you have to know your child in every level, because they spend a lot of times at school.
A lot of time at school.
And so again, when you're your child advocate. And so when you don't know how your child is, it's hard for you to advocate for that child as well at school. And so you got to know that, because the school offers a lot of support. And then there's support teams and parent support agencies out there too that could help the parent. And parent groups, parenting skills groups out there.
So parenting groups, parenting support, check your school system, be involved.
Definitely be involved.
With your child's school, know what's going on.
Yes.
These are really some great places to
Definitely.
start.
And one thing, not being afraid to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. I think a lot of people shame, embarrassment, but it's okay to ask for help.
I like that too. Yeah. So it is okay. Please get help if you need to take that step.
Definitely.
Great tips, and we will be back right after this. I'm Dr. Hammond with 5 great tips to help your child during the school year. Number 1, have a plan at the beginning of the school year. Maybe you're watching this and it's not the beginning of the school year, and that's okay, but try to have a plan at the beginning of every school year when it comes to homework, when it comes to consequences for school, when it comes to your reinforcements and how you're going to praise academic achievements. Number 2, make sure that you know who the key contacts in your school district, who those people are, because it's so important to make sure that you know who to go to if your child has a problem. Many children are affected by bullying, for example. You might have a problem with your child academically, or there may be another issue that you need to resolve. So know who the key contacts are in your school district. Number 3, make sure to familiarize yourself with the rules at your school. There are many rules in many districts that have specific rules when it comes to bullying, when it comes to special education, and all the other needs of students. So make sure that you know what those rules are. Number 4, make sure to be organized and keep a copy, a physical copy or a digital copy of all of the important school documents, so you know where they are and they're readily available when you may need them in future visits to physicians or other mental health professionals. And number 5, make sure that you have a team of support and you use it, whether it be your family, your friends, the school system, or whomever else. Make sure that you utilize those individuals. Thanks. Welcome back. We've been talking today about the emotional health of your child, socially, emotionally. How are they doing? What to do, what steps to take. I want to talk a little bit now about this idea of trauma, because a lot of times when people hear the word trauma, they think of the worst case possibility, but really there's a lot of other things that can be traumatic to children.
Definitely.
So what are some of those things that you found?
Yeah, some of the simple things. Divorce, which could be a big deal, definitely. Separation from home in terms of after the divorce, having to leave the home, siblings being separated. Favoritism in families plays a big part.
Wow.
Yes, so that's a big thing. Favoritism in families. New child being born. So if you're used to being the only child for a long time, when there's a new child born, sometimes that could create some distress in the home. When parents are getting married, in terms of step parenting.
Oh, okay. So
different things like that, the change in that.
The transitions.
And the dynamics of the home, when you have a child who's used to just me and mom, it's just been me and mom for so long. And now there's another.
Adding in.
And adding into that home. And adding a parent.
Right, either way.
So either way, it's a change and could be stressful.
And these are really some great examples, because a lot of times I don't think when we think of trauma, again, we think of a hurricane or extreme abuse or something like that. But these things are traumatic for children too.
Definitely.
So how can parents work to address these traumas and talk to children about it before they really become traumatized?
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to talk to kids. So one thing I do hear a lot is parents have a difficult time talking to their kids about things, thinking this is adult conversation. And true, to some extent, there's a level of things that the kids need to know, but whether we tell them or not, they know it. Because they're living in it, they're experiencing it, they feel it, they know. All of a sudden, dad's here, dad's not here.
They know, yes.
And so when we're saying, oh, well, we're going to just wait to tell him, he's still not here in the meantime.
Yeah.
And so when that happens is the kid creates their own narrative as to what happened, and kids tend to blame themselves for it. And so one of the things I tell parents, yes, it's important to, at their level, but it's important to communicate, because when you're not communicating with them, they're communicating in their head. They're figuring things out. You know,
That
and
is
they're
very,
creating their own.
very, very true, and really young children too.
Oh,
I mean, they could be 6, 8. They make up all sorts of stories.
They make up all sorts
about
of
what's
stuff.
going on
What's
and
going
the
on.
reason why
Right.
your mom or dad's not home or something
Exactly.
like that. So for us as adults to explain to them age appropriately what's going on is more beneficial. You're saying
Definitely.
instead of letting them figure it out.
Yes, or coming, figuring out much later. So, for example, I had a scenario where the father was incarcerated. So the father didn't live in the home, but the kids went to see father every weekend. The father was incarcerated. And so once he got incarcerated, they weren't able to see him for those weekends. And the girls and everybody around them said, well, Dad's working. Dad's working. And so the girls started saying, well, Dad doesn't need to work that hard. We don't need anything from Dad. We just want to be with Dad. So that's what they start saying. They start blaming themselves for Dad working so hard because they figure that he's working hard to get them things.
Yeah.
And so when she said that, the mom was like, I guess I need to say something. Yeah, because they'll make up stuff.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because we want things to be in some type of order. As humans, that's how we are. And so we'll rationalize the situation to make it make sense. And it's important for as much of the truth as it could be.
Right.
That's important.
Right. I totally agree. I think that's really important, vital. Like you said, children are so smart.
Yeah.
They're smarter than we give them credit for. Sometimes they tend to eavesdrop. They tend to get into emails and all sorts of other things that they shouldn't be. Sometimes, but they're curious too.
Curious,
Kids
right.
are curious, and they will find out things that maybe you don't want them to necessarily.
Yes.
So again, like you said, talking to them and processing is so
It's
important.
It is.
Are there other tips that you have for parents just going through the process of figuring out what do I do with my child, maybe with a behavioral issue after divorce, let's say? What are some tips that you have for parents to help their child to sort of get back on track?
Sure. Let's take a situation of divorce. So it's important, again, for the parents to still, as much as possible, be amicable because you are now co-parenting. And so that's a lot of things that I talk with parents about too, making sure you guys are on the same page. Because if you're okay to some extent, then that could help the child be okay.
Definitely.
And definitely the communication, if they need to seek professional help, if they want to make sure things are okay at school, because again, there could be stressors at school that's going on. Having conversations with your child is so important. The eating dinners together is important. Playing the games. During those times are times we could have those conversations, because I'm not telling you, clean your room.
Right.
We're not creating a boundary at this moment or a disconnection. We're creating harmony, So playtime is a great time. I play this game, a simple game, Candyland, with little kids where we, with each time they go into these colors, you talk about feelings, and that could be an opportunity. Tell me how you feel about this or how you feel about that.
And I like that because playtime, like you said, is not as, sit down, we need to have the talk about something.
Sure.
You find the playtime or maybe driving in the car to practice or something like that to have those conversations.
Definitely.
I like that.
Definitely.
I like that so much. So tell us a little bit about if someone wants to learn more about what you do, your website, and a little bit more about your practice.
Yes. So my practice is in Decatur. It's Esteem Counseling and Consulting Services, and Esteem stands for Empower Self Through Enrichment, Education, and Motivation. Again, the goal is to uplift my clients and to help them be empowered and to raise their self-esteem. And so I have a website. It's esteemcounselingservices.com, and I could be reached at 678-732-7269 if anybody's interested.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for being
Thank
a
you.
wonderful guest and providing all those great tips.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.